Hello, listeners of the podcast. Today's story is about the man I once called father, a respected physician who cared for me more devotedly than my own husband when I was hospitalized. He was a kind man admired by all, but one night, pretending to be asleep, I overheard a shocking confession from him, and in a terror that shook my life to its core, I had to desperately call the police. A headache, sharp and brutal as a hammer, struck my temples, and the world went black. The last thing I heard was the shatter of the coffee mug slipping from my hand, the sound of porcelain exploding against the floor. I remember the splash of dark coffee staining the hem of my white dress. My colleagues shouting my name, the urgent thud of footsteps on the hardwood floor, it all faded, sinking into a deep, profound darkness. That was my last memory before the void swallowed me whole. When I finally forced my eyes open, I wasn't greeted by the familiar ceiling of my office, but by a chillingly cold, sterile white space. The sharp antiseptic smell pierced through my numb senses, waking every nerve. I shifted slightly, a groan escaping my lips. My entire body ached, as if I had been pulled back from the brink of death. My vision cleared, and I took in the spacious, well-equipped hospital room. Through the pale blue curtains, the last rays of sunset streamed in. A man stood by the window, his back to me. It was a broad, sturdy back, but it wasn't my husband, Michael. "You're awake," he said, turning around. "You have no idea how worried I was." It was my father-in-law, Dr. Arthur Coleman. With his neatly combed salt and pepper hair and kind face, he was the picture of benevolence. Dr. Coleman had been the head of internal medicine at this university hospital before his retirement, a man who commanded respect from every doctor and nurse who crossed his path. He strode over to me, his large, warm hand landing expertly on my forehead. It was a gesture meant to be reassuring, but a cold shiver traced its way down my spine. I glanced around nervously, my voice hoarse as I forced the words out. "Michael. Where's Michael?" "He just stepped out to take a call, dear," Dr. Coleman said, pulling a plush chair to my bedside. His voice was low, but it held an authority that was impossible to defy. "It's the end of the quarter at his firm. You know how crazy it gets." Just then, the door flew open. Michael rushed in, phone still in hand, a harried expression on his face. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw I was awake, but his foot was still tapping restlessly on the floor. He came over and gave my hand a perfunctory squeeze. "Emily, thank God you're awake." The doctor said it was severe exhaustion from overwork. "You'll have to stay for a few days for observation. I've already taken care of the paperwork, got you the best VIP suite." "I want to go home," I mumbled, a growing sense of unease creeping over me. I hated hospitals, but the feeling of being left here alone was even worse. Michael frowned, his voice tinged with irritation. "Don't be a child, Emily. This isn't something to joke about. Besides, I have to get back to the office right now. We're in the final stages of a huge project and I can't be away." A wave of disappointment washed over me. In our 5 years of marriage, whenever I was at my most vulnerable, he always used work as his shield. I opened my mouth to beg him to stay a little longer, but my father-in-law intervened. "I'll look after Emily, so don't you worry," he said in a commanding tone. "I'm retired, I have all the time in the world, and more importantly, I'm a professional. I wouldn't feel right leaving her with you or these young nurses." Hearing this, Michael looked as if he'd been granted a reprieve. "You hear that, honey?" he said, trying to sound reasonable. "Dad is the most respected doctor in this hospital's history. Everyone here listens to him. You're 1,000 times safer with him than with me. Just be a good girl for a few days, okay?" I glanced at my father-in-law and met his intense gaze. It wasn't just observation. There was a strange, unsettling possessiveness in his eyes that made my skin crawl. I forced a smile, trying to find a polite way to refuse. "Arthur, I appreciate it, but it feels a little awkward just the two of us. I'll be fine on my own, or we can hire a private nurse." "Nonsense." Dr. Coleman cut me off, his tone firm but his smile never wavering. He patted the back of my hand and the pressure was surprisingly strong, making me flinch. "You're the daughter I never had. Who else would take care of you? Your mother-in-law passed away so young it was just me and Michael for years. Now that you're sick, it's my responsibility. Don't you worry about a thing. Just focus on getting better." Michael nodded eagerly, gave me a token kiss on the forehead and hurried out. "I'm off then. You two take care. Dad, call me if anything happens." As the door clicked shut behind him, I was left alone with my respected father-in-law in a room thick with the smell of chemicals. The space suddenly felt suffocating. Dr. Coleman began moving around the room, unpacking my things into the closet. He hung my coat on a hanger, meticulously smoothing out every wrinkle before turning to look at me. His gaze was like that of a collector scrutinizing a doll in a display case. It was deeply unsettling. He poured a glass of warm water and brought it to my lips himself. "Drink this," he said, his gentle voice leaving no room for refusal. "You need to hydrate. From now on, I'm in charge of your recovery. I'm going to make you healthy again. Healthier than you've ever been." As I took the glass, my fingers brushed against his large, rough ones. A sticky, unpleasant sensation made me almost drop it. I ducked my head to hide my confusion, and the vague fear seeping into my heart. Outside, the sky was already a bruised gray. It was the signal that a long, long night was about to begin. And in this sterile white room under my father-in-law's suffocating care, I felt incredibly small and utterly alone. Dr. Coleman sat in the chair right next to my bed. On the small table between us was a bowl of steaming soup. The savory aroma of chicken, wild rice, and herbs filled the air, but for some reason my stomach churned with nausea. He carefully lifted the lid, stirred the soup with a spoon blue on it to cool it, and brought a spoonful to my lips. "Here, open up," he cooed. "It's a special recipe of mine. I simmered it for hours with ingredients that are excellent for calming the nerves." I turned my head away embarrassed. "Arthur, please, you don't have to do that. I can eat by myself. My hands are fine. It feels strange for you to feed me." "What's so strange about it?" He didn't move the spoon. His eyes held a mixture of sternness and excessive affection. He clicked his tongue. "You're so weak you can barely sit up. Your hands are probably shaking. You'll just spill it all over the bed, and then we'll have to change the sheets. It's a hassle. Now be a good girl and listen." Reluctantly, I opened my mouth. The warm soup slid down my throat, but it tasted bitter. Seeing me swallow, Dr. Coleman smiled with satisfaction. He brought a second spoonful, and then a third. It wasn't the act of being fed by my father-in-law that creeped me out. It was the way he did it. With every spoonful, his pinky finger would intentionally brush against my lower lip, or he would use the excuse of wiping away a drop of soup to graze my cheek. The contact was light and fleeting, but it was enough to send a shiver through my entire body. After I'd forced down about half the bowl, I shook my head, insisting I couldn't eat anymore. Dr. Coleman didn't push. He carefully wiped my mouth with a napkin as if I were a toddler. After cleaning up, he picked up my phone from the nightstand. "You must be bored. Here, you can pass the time with this. The battery was almost dead, so I charged it for you." I took the phone, a seed of suspicion sprouting in my mind. I distinctly remembered the battery being under 20% right before I collapsed at work. I was just about to plug it in after finishing a report, but now in the corner of the screen, the number 100% glowed green. I unlocked it and quickly scrolled through my messages and apps. On the surface, everything looked normal, but a woman's intuition told me something was wrong. All the apps that had been running in the background were closed. My internet browsing history was completely wiped clean. Someone had gone through my phone. And that someone was my father-in-law, who was now calmly peeling an apple as if nothing had happened. "Arthur," I began, my voice trembling as I gathered my courage, "did you look at my phone?" He paused, the knife still in his hand. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but it was instantly replaced by a hearty laugh. "This old man can barely see. What would I know about these newfangled gadgets? I must have touched the screen by accident when I was plugging it in. Or do you have some secrets you're hiding from Michael? You seem awfully scared that I might have seen something." His question left me speechless. I quickly shook my head and stammered, "No, of course not. I was just asking." Just then, the door opened and a young doctor entered with a nurse named Jessica. As the doctor holding my chart was about to greet me, Dr. Coleman shot up from his chair. The authority of a former department head instantly returned. He walked over to the young doctor, took the chart from his hands, and began scrutinizing it. "This nutritional supplement you've prescribed is problematic," he declared, pointing a finger at the chart. "She has a history of low blood pressure. This type will only make her dizziness worse. Change it to the one imported from Germany. I'll write down the name for you." The young doctor looked flustered. "Yes, Dr. Coleman, but according to hospital protocol." "Protocol? What protocol?" Dr. Coleman cut him off, his presence overwhelming. He lowered his voice, but it was firm enough for everyone in the room to hear. "I worked in this hospital for 30 years. You think I don't know your rigid procedures? I know my daughter-in-law's condition better than anyone. You will do as I say, and schedule a spinal tap and a genetic test for tomorrow. I suspect a fundamental issue with her immune system." Lying in bed, my body went cold at the words spinal tap. It was an excruciatingly painful procedure typically reserved for diagnosing very serious illnesses. I had just fainted from overwork. Why would I need a test like that? As I was about to object, I caught Nurse Jessica looking at me with pity in her eyes. She started to say something, then closed her mouth and took a step back. It was clear that in this hospital, Dr. Coleman's word was law. As soon as the doctor and nurse left, I quickly pulled the covers over my head and secretly called Michael. As soon as he picked up, I started sobbing. "Michael, you have to stop your dad. He wants me to get a spinal tap. I'm so scared." It was just exhaustion. "Oh, for God's sake, Emily, you always have to make a big deal out of everything." His voice was cold and dismissive. "Dad's an expert. He's just being thorough for your own good. People wait in line for months to get an appointment with him, and you're complaining I have to go. I'm with clients. Just do what Dad says." The dial tone buzzed in my ear, cutting off my last sliver of hope. I let my hand fall, the phone dropping onto the mattress with a soft thud. I looked over at the chair. Dr. Coleman was meticulously wiping his paring knife. The blade glinted ominously under the cold lights. I felt like a fish on a cutting board, stripped of all rights to resist, trapped in a snare called family set by my husband and father-in-law. The hospital night stretched on for what felt like a century. The ticking of the clock was a steady beat against my eardrum, punctuated by the faint hum of machinery from the nurse's station down the hall. I lay perfectly still in bed, my eyes closed, but my mind was wide awake, sharp and alert. Perhaps it was the thick smell of antiseptic, or perhaps it was the presence of the man in the cot next to my bed, my father-in-law, Dr. Coleman. His snores came in a regular rhythm, but every time he shifted, the creak of the cot made my heart pound in my chest. A formless anxiety gnawed at me, whispering that I couldn't let my guard down, not even in sleep. Around 3 a.m. The world fell into an eerie silence. I heard a faint rustling sound from beside me, and Dr. Coleman's snoring suddenly stopped. I held my breath, peering through my eyelashes, trying to regulate my breathing to mimic someone in a deep sleep. In the dim light filtering in from the hallway, a large shadow rose. It didn't move toward the bathroom. It moved directly toward my bed. Dr. Coleman stood over me like a mountain, blocking what little light there was. He leaned in his face close to mine. I could feel his breath on my cheek, a cool, stale breath laced with the faint scent of old tobacco. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. He studied me for a full minute like a scientist observing a specimen. Once he was convinced I was sound asleep, he carefully pulled a small syringe from the pocket of his robe. In the dim light, the clear liquid inside the syringe glinted sharply. With practiced ease, Dr. Coleman inserted the needle into the rubber port of the IV bag hanging by my bed. The same hands that had saved countless lives were now injecting an unknown substance into his daughter-in-law's bloodstream. The liquid mixed with the IV solution, and drop by drop it traveled down the tube, heading straight for my veins. I could feel a cold sensation spread up my arm and through my body. But it wasn't his surreptitious action that plunged me into the depths of terror. It was the words he muttered under his breath. His voice, raspy in the dead of night, sounded like a summons from hell. "This one's constitution is much better than Grace's. But this dosage is still not enough. I'll have to increase it by 30% tomorrow to reach the baseline." Grace. The name sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It was the name of my deceased mother-in-law. I'd been told she passed away 15 years ago from a rare disease that even he, a brilliant doctor, couldn't cure. I lay there, feigning death. A cold sweat drenched my pajamas. Only when Dr. Coleman returned to his cot and his snoring resumed did I dare to open my eyes and stare at the ceiling. Terrified tears streamed down my temples, soaking my pillow. This devoted care wasn't family love. It was a meticulously designed death trap set by a madman in a doctor's coat. Dawn brought a faint light, but it couldn't dispel the darkness in my heart. Dr. Coleman woke up early, stretched, and turned to me with his usual gentle smile. He told me he was going to buy me a special venison broth for breakfast, a food I detested for its gamey smell, but one he always forced on me, claiming it would purify my blood. As I watched his back disappear behind the door, I knew this was my only chance to act. I couldn't just lie here and wait to be slaughtered. I forced myself to sit up. A wave of dizziness hit me and I nearly fell. I gripped the bed rail, staring at the IV bag. There was still a little fluid left. I remembered the meaningful look Nurse Jessica had given me yesterday, a look of pity mixed with a warning. She had to know something. With trembling hands, I retrieved an empty eye drop bottle I always carried in my purse. I rushed to the bathroom and rinsed it thoroughly. Back at the bed, I gritted my teeth and pulled the IV needle from my arm. Blood trickled out, but I didn't care. I held the small bottle under the end of the IV tube, collecting the last drops. As they fell, each one a slow test of my patience. When the bottle was about half full, I heard Dr. Coleman's familiar footsteps in the hallway. Terrified, I quickly hid the bottle deep inside my bra, a place he would never search. I hastily reinserted the needle into my arm, pulled the covers up to my chest, and pretended to be asleep. A few minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Coleman came in holding a container of steaming broth. Thankfully, right behind him was Nurse Jessica, arriving for her shift. She pushed a cart into the room and gave Dr. Coleman a brief nod. He acknowledged her and set the broth on the table. "Change her dressing, would you? I need a smoke to clear my head." Watching over her all night has worn me out. The moment Dr. Coleman left the room, I shot my eyes open and grabbed Jessica's wrist. She nearly cried out in surprise, but I put a finger to my lips, signaling for her to be quiet. With a shaking hand, I pulled the eye drop bottle from my bra and pressed it into her hand. "Jessica, please," I whispered, my voice choked with unshed tears. "Get this tested for me. My father-in-law injected something into my IV last night. I'm so scared. Please." Jessica looked at the small bottle still warm from my body and glanced nervously around. She quickly slipped it into her pocket. Leaning close, she whispered, her voice so low only I could hear, but each word thundered in my ears. "I knew it. I saw him on the nurse's station computer last night, secretly altering your medical records. He deleted all the warning flags from your lab results. Be careful, Emily. He's not what he seems." Her confirmation was both a relief and a terror. A relief that I wasn't going crazy, and a terror that my enemy was so cunning and dangerous. I looked at Jessica with eyes full of pleading and gratitude. She gave a slight nod, squeezed my hand once, and then went about her work as if nothing had happened. From the hallway, Dr. Coleman's footsteps were approaching again, carrying the foul stench of tobacco and the scent of the death he had planned for me. Dr. Coleman returned to the room looking refreshed, though the faint smell of smoke still clung to his clothes. When he opened the container of broth, the gamey odor hit me and my stomach clenched. He spooned it up, blew on it, and brought it to my lips, his voice gentle but his eyes as cold as steel. "Eat up. You need your strength. We have that spinal tap this afternoon to check your immune system. You'll need to be strong to endure the pain." "A spinal tap!" I cried out in horror. The broth in my mouth tasted like poison. "Why do I need a spinal tap? I just fainted from exhaustion." My attending physician didn't say anything about it. "What does he know?" Dr. Coleman snapped, then softened his voice to soothe me. "I've consulted with the other specialists. They suspect you have a rare autoimmune disorder. The spinal tap is necessary for a definitive diagnosis. Trust me, Emily. I've been a doctor my whole life. Would I ever harm my own daughter-in-law?" Fear tightened its grip on my heart. A spinal tap was no joke. And after what I'd witnessed last night, I knew he was trying to kill me, or at the very least leave me a vegetable. I secretly slipped my hand under the pillow and dialed Michael. After several rings, he finally answered, his voice thick with annoyance from being interrupted. "What is it now? I'm in an important meeting." "Michael, save me," I sobbed, keeping my voice as low as possible. "Your dad is making me get a spinal tap. He injected a strange drug into my IV. I'm so scared. Please come and get me." "There you go again," he shouted, and I could hear him slam something on his desk. "Are you paranoid? My father is one of the best doctors alive, and he loves you like his own daughter. Instead of being grateful, you accuse him. Stop this childish nonsense. You're exhausting me." The long, merciless dial tone cut off my last lifeline. I dropped the phone, tears streaming down my cheeks. The man I loved most had completely abandoned me. I was now alone in this wolf's den. Just then, Dr. Coleman got up and went to the door. I could hear him arguing fiercely with a resident. "I said we're doing it, and that's final. Who are you to question my expertise in my own field? I will take full responsibility for this patient." This was my chance. His attention was diverted. I grabbed a napkin from the table and with a trembling hand took a pen. Jessica had accidentally left behind. On the thin white paper, I scrawled a shaky message. "Help me. Father-in-law poisoned my IV. Please call police. He's trying to kill me." I folded the note 4 times and clutched it in my sweaty palm. When Jessica came back in to change my dressing, I pretended to be in pain and grabbed the hem of her scrubs. While Dr. Coleman was still arguing loudly in the hall, I quickly shoved the note into her pocket. I looked at her, pouring all my desperation into my gaze. The air in the room was stretched as taut as a bowstring. Just 15 minutes after Jessica left, a commotion of footsteps echoed from the hallway. The door burst open. Jessica stood there, her face pale, pointing at me and crying out, "Officers, security, there's someone in here trying to kill this patient." Behind her were 2 police officers and the hospital security team. The room instantly descended into chaos. I cowered on the bed, a flicker of hope piercing through my fear. Dr. Coleman, who had been adjusting the IV drip, froze for a split second, but only a second. His expression shifted from surprise to an almost serene calm. "What seems to be the problem, officers?" he asked, his voice steady, his demeanor every bit the respected physician. One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, we received a report that you were attempting to administer a poison to the patient through her IV. We need to secure the scene for an investigation." "Poison," Dr. Coleman let out a bitter, incredulous laugh. He pointed to the IV bag, which was still half full. "Are you referring to this? This is a high-grade protein supplement I had specially imported from a clinic in Switzerland. My daughter-in-law is so weak she can't keep any food down. I was so worried about her, I just mixed a little in her IV to help her regain her strength." He calmly opened a drawer and produced a bundle of receipts and a small bottle with foreign text, showing them to the police. "Here are the purchase documents and the instructions. I have been a doctor for decades. I save lives. Why on earth would I harm my own child?" I was stunned. I was certain that last night he'd used an unlabeled syringe. How had it suddenly transformed into a supplement with receipts? The police took the IV bag and asked the medical staff to run an on-the-spot test. The next 10 minutes felt like a century. My heart hammered against my ribs as I prayed for the truth to be revealed. But when a nurse returned with the results, all my hopes were dashed. "No harmful toxins detected," she said quietly. "The primary components are amino acids and vitamins." "That's impossible," I screamed, trying to sit up. "He injected poison last night. I saw him. He must have switched it. He changed the IV bag while I was asleep." But no one listened. They all looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and pity. Suddenly, Dr. Coleman buried his face in his hands and began to sob. His old, weary shoulders shook. "My God, what has happened to my daughter-in-law, doctor? Could it be a side effect of the high-dose antibiotics? Is she having hallucinations? I stayed up all night caring for her, and now she accuses me of this." His performance was perfect. In an instant, he transformed from a cold-blooded murderer into a devoted father falsely accused by his ailing daughter-in-law. The police officers looked at each other awkwardly, then back at me as if I were a hysterical mental patient. The small flame of hope inside me was extinguished, replaced by a suffocating despair. I had lost. I had been utterly defeated by my father-in-law's cunning and perfectly crafted deception. My vision blurred not from tears, but from the sheer shock of it all. I sat huddled on the bed, clutching the white sheets. All around me were the suspicious gazes of the police and the pitiful looks of the medical staff. "Doctor." Coleman was still dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, the perfect picture of a heartbroken old father falsely accused by his own family. His act was so convincing that even I, the victim, started to wonder if I was actually going insane. Just as the heavy silence settled, a figure burst through the door like a storm. It was Michael. He was panting, his forehead slick with sweat, his suit disheveled. Like a drowning person grasping at a straw, I wanted to run to him for protection. But what met me was not a warm embrace or a gentle reassurance. It was the soul-shattering crack of a slap. The sharp sound echoed in the quiet room. The force of the blow sent me staggering back onto the bed. One side of my face burned, and I could taste the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. I looked up at Michael, too stunned to speak. The man I loved, the man who had vowed to protect me for life, was now glaring at me with eyes red with hatred and rage. He pointed a finger in my face, his voice trembling with fury. "What the hell are you doing, Emily? Have you lost your mind? Dad stays up all night taking care of you, tending to your every need, and you repay him by calling the cops to have him arrested. Do you want to destroy this family?" "No, Shut up, Michael, cut me off." He glanced at his father, who was sitting in the chair looking utterly defeated, then at the police officers. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice filled with shame. "My wife, she hasn't been mentally stable lately. She's been having delusions. This is a family matter, we'll handle it." "I'm so sorry for the trouble." One of the officers closed his notebook, shaking his head in disapproval. "You folks need to get a handle on the patient. Filing a false report is a serious offense. We'll be leaving now. You two sort this out." They left, taking my last sliver of hope with them. Nurse Jessica, hiding by the doorway, looked at me with helpless pity before being reprimanded by the head nurse for causing a scene. The door closed, and I was trapped with the two men I called family. Dr. Coleman finally raised his head. There wasn't a trace of tears in his cunning eyes. He stood up, patted Michael's shoulder, and said in a sad, resigned voice, "It's all right, son. Don't blame her. She's sick, her mind is not right. I'm fine. But I don't feel comfortable leaving her in the hospital like this. What if she causes another scene and tarnishes the hospital's reputation? What if people start spreading rumors?" Michael nodded repeatedly, his face a mask of gratitude and respect for his father. "You're right, Dad. I'm sorry. I've failed to discipline my wife properly. I'll start the discharge process immediately and take her home. We'll follow your treatment plan. We'll keep her at home and get her psychiatric help. You're the only one who can fix her. The words psychiatric help made my body go limp. They were going to lock me up and turn me into a real madwoman. I tried to struggle and scream, but Michael grabbed my shoulders firmly. His eyes now held a mixture of pity and disgust. Behave, Emily. Let's go home. Dad will treat you at home and you'll be better in no time. I was half dragged out of the room by my husband. As we walked down the long, dark corridor, people pointed and whispered about the crazy daughter-in-law who had tried to have her own father-in-law arrested. Forcibly placed in the back of a luxury sedan, I caught Dr. Coleman's eyes in the rearview mirror. He was adjusting his collar, and for a fleeting moment, a cold, triumphant smile played on his lips. It was the smile of a hunter who had successfully trapped his prey. The car passed through heavy iron gates and pulled up to the family's imposing 3-story home. I used to be proud of living in this spacious, beautiful house. But now, looking at the high walls topped with sharp iron fencing, it felt like nothing more than a cold, gilded cage. Michael helped me up to the second-floor bedroom. The once bright and airy room had been completely transformed. The large glass window overlooking the garden was now barred with crisscrossing wooden planks, allowing only thin slivers of light to seep through. I ran to it and pushed with all my might, but it was useless. Every escape route was sealed. Michael sighed. You're in an unstable state right now. Dad said, we had to make sure you don't get any funny ideas about jumping. It's for your own safety. I'm not crazy, I don't want to die, I screamed, grabbing his arm. Look at me, I'm perfectly fine, why do you believe him over me? He pulled his hand away, his face etched with exhaustion and disappointment. Stop it. He's my father, Emily. He spent his entire life saving people. Stop with the delusions. Just stay here quietly and don't cause any more trouble. I have to go to work to pay your hospital bills. He left, and the sound of the key turning in the lock was as final as a nail being hammered into a coffin. I collapsed onto the floor, completely defeated. A few moments later, the lock turned again. Dr. Coleman entered carrying a tray of food. He still wore that gentle, kind expression, but in this sealed room, his presence was suffocating. Time to eat, dear. I made a special herbal chicken soup today to fortify your blood. He set the tray on the table. A thick, medicinal smell overpowered the savory aroma of the chicken. I scrambled to the corner of the bed, watching him warily. I'm not eating it. Don't think you can poison my food again. Dr. Coleman chuckled softly. He pulled a chair and sat across from me, speaking as if soothing a child. There you go with that nonsense again. Poison, this is my love for you. You need to eat this to get healthy so you can give me a grandchild. Now be good and have a little. He spooned some of the dark broth and brought it to my lips. I clamped my mouth shut, but he swiftly and firmly squeezed my cheeks. The pain was so sharp that I gasped, and he poured the liquid in. The bitter, foul taste filled my mouth. I wanted to spit it out, but he held my mouth shut, forcing me to swallow. See, isn't it good? You have to finish the whole bowl before you can rest. After forcing a few more spoonfuls down my throat, he left the bowl on the table and walked out, not forgetting to lock the door. The moment he was gone, I scrambled to the bathroom and shoved my fingers down my throat, gagging violently. Acidic bile and the black broth came pouring out. I turned on the faucet to mask the sound and splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. I couldn't starve myself. That would only make me weaker. From then on, I would pretend to eat with relish in front of him. Then when he wasn't looking, I would secretly spit the food into tissues, wrap them tightly, and hide them in a planter on the small mesh-covered balcony, the one place in the room that wasn't completely sealed off. That night, as I lay in bed tossing and turning, my eyes happened to catch something in the corner of the ceiling. A tiny red light blinked in the darkness. My heart stopped. I scanned the room and saw another one tucked away in the corner of the wardrobe. Cameras. He had installed cameras all over the room. My every move, my every action, even when I changed clothes or slept, was being watched by his predatory eyes through a screen. The days that followed were a grueling stretch of psychological torture. Although I avoided eating the food, Dr. Coleman prepared subsisting on a few dried snacks. I had managed to hide my health deteriorated. My head felt heavy as if filled with lead, and I was constantly dizzy. The headaches became more frequent and intense, and phantoms danced at the edge of my vision. Sometimes I would see cockroaches crawling on the walls, other times a dark figure would stand in the corner of the room mocking me. I started to wonder if I really was going insane. But one sweltering afternoon, a strange fragrance wafting through the window brought me to a sudden, terrifying realization. From an ornate brass diffuser in the corner of the room, a thin stream of white vapor rose. The scent wasn't the usual calming lavender he claimed it to be. It was a cloying, sickly sweet smell that made me nauseous. He had said it was to calm my mind and body, but I knew now that this very vapor was what was paralyzing my nerves moment by moment. That afternoon, Michael came home early. He entered the room to find me cowering in a corner, terrified of the dancing illusions before my eyes, muttering incomprehensible words. He looked at me not with the anger I had seen at the hospital, but with heartbreaking pity. "Emily, what's wrong?" As he approached to put a hand on my shoulder, I shrieked and pushed him away. "Don't come near me. You're trying to kill me too. Get away." Michael recoiled in shock. He looked to his father, who was standing by the door with a worried expression. Dr. Coleman shook his head and sighed. "You see, her condition has worsened. I told you we needed to use a stronger sedative. You were worried about the side effects, and now she can't even recognize her own husband." Watching me struggle in a chemically induced hallucination, Michael finally nodded in defeat. "Okay, Dad, give me the medicine. I can't stand to see her like this anymore." Dr. Coleman approached a small but potent-looking blue pill in his hand. He handed it to Michael. "You give it to her. She won't take it from me. She's afraid of me right now." Michael took the pill and came towards me. I looked at my husband, tears streaming down my face. The man who had once shared my bed was now holding poison given to him by his father, forcing it on me in the name of treatment. "Please don't," I begged, my voice a hoarse whisper. "I don't want to take this. I'm fine." "Take it," Michael said, his voice weary and disappointed. He grabbed my jaw, forced the pill into my mouth, and held a cup of water to my lips, making me swallow. "Drink this and get better so you can come back to me. When you're like this, it's too hard for me too." The bitter medicine slid down my throat. I stared at Michael with eyes full of despair. Did he have any idea he was aiding a murderer, or did he know and simply choose to look away? Either way, the betrayal was a pain worse than death. The drug worked quickly. My eyelids grew heavy, and my consciousness began to fade. Just before I slipped into darkness, I heard Dr. Coleman's voice speaking to Michael. "Well done. A few more times like this and she'll become completely docile." I woke as sunlight slanted through the gaps in the wooden planks on the window, creating long stripes of light on the dusty floor. My head throbbed as if it had been struck, and my throat was parched. The blue pill from yesterday had sapped my last reserves of strength, but strangely, it left me with a moment of startling clarity before the next wave of confusion was due to set in. I heard the sound of digging from the backyard. I dragged myself to the balcony and peeked through the mesh. Dr. Coleman was bent over digging in the garden. Beside him was a small black bag. He was burying lab rats dead and stiff. He had told Michael they were vermin caught in traps, but I knew better. They were the casualties of his poison experiments. Michael was at work. It was just me and Dr. Coleman in the house. But he was occupied outside. This was a godsend, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I searched the room frantically for a way to contact the outside world. My phone, laptop, iPad, all my electronics had been confiscated. The room was bare, save for my clothes and a few innocuous personal items. In despair, I sank to the floor. I reached under the old wardrobe in the corner, a place that hadn't been touched since we were married, a repository for Michael's old college junk. My fingertips brushed against something cold and dusty. I pulled it out. It was an old Nokia-style flip phone with a long crack across the screen. My heart pounded. With trembling hands, I pressed the power button, but the screen remained dark. The battery was dead. I rummaged through a dresser drawer and found an old universal charging cable. I plugged it into a hidden outlet behind the headboard and held my breath. A single red bar of battery life blinked to life. It still worked. I waited for about 5 minutes, long enough for the device to power on. Thankfully, Michael's old SIM card was still inside. The plan had long since expired, but it could still receive messages and, more importantly, connect to Wi-Fi. I searched for networks and saw my next-door neighbors. What was the password I vaguely remembered her telling me when I'd helped her connect her son's iPad a while back? Nancy, 1 2 3 4, no. I love my family, no. My palms were sweating, making the keypad slippery. I tried one more time. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Connected. I almost cried out in joy. I immediately logged into WhatsApp on the new device, and a flood of notifications poured in. I scrolled past messages from concerned colleagues and friends until I stopped at Jessica's name. A message from last night. "Emily, I got the test results from the eye drop bottle. You're in mortal danger. It contains arsenic and mercury at levels 50 times the fatal dose. It's a Class A poison. Long-term exposure will cause multi-organ failure and death. You have to get out of there. I'm trying to find someone who can help you." The message was a death sentence, but it was also the most powerful proof of my innocence. I'm not crazy. I'm not delusional. I am being systematically and cruelly poisoned. I took a screenshot of the message, and with shaking hands typed a reply. "I'm locked in the house. Jessica, please, you have to save me." Before I could even hit send, I heard heavy footsteps just outside in the hall. The sound of a key in the lock. It was him. Terrified, I yanked out the charger, shoved the phone and cable deep into the stuffing of a large teddy bear on the bed, a wedding anniversary gift from Michael last year. Just as I lay down and pulled the covers to my chin, the door swung open. Dr. Coleman entered. His hands were still slightly dirty from the garden. His sharp eyes scanned the room like a radar, searching for anything out of place. I spent the next few hours in a state of high anxiety. I could only guess at the passage of time by the shifting angle of the sunlight filtering through the boarded-up window. But fate hadn't abandoned me entirely. My chance came on a sweltering afternoon when the summer heat made the air thick and heavy. It was the day of the monthly HOA meeting. As an exemplary retired professional, it was a meeting Dr. Coleman was obligated to attend. Michael was still burying himself in work, avoiding reality. Hearing the heavy front door slam shut and the sound of his car driving away, I knew I had a precious 2-hour window. I ran to my vanity and found the thin metal nail file I'd managed to hide when he was organizing my belongings. My hands shook, and sweat dripped from my forehead onto the wooden floor. I inserted the pointed tip of the file into the keyhole, gently turning it, listening for the faintest click. I'd seen a life hack video online once. I never thought I'd be using a burglar's trick in my own home. Click. The dry sound of the lock disengaging was like a gunshot in my ear. Holding my breath, I eased the door open and peeked into the empty hallway. The vast house was submerged in a frightening silence broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. I tiptoed down the hall towards Dr. Coleman's study at the far end. This room had always been his sacred sanctuary. Even Michael rarely entered without his father's permission. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open, and a musty smell of old paper and his signature antiseptic scent hit me. The room was pitch black, the heavy curtains drawn. I didn't dare turn on the light, relying on the faint glow of the old flip phone to guide me. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves were packed with thick medical tomes, and the desk was littered with anatomical models, their white forms ghostly in the dark. I remembered something Michael had once said offhandedly. His father had a habit of hiding his most valuable things behind his thickest medical books. My fingers traced the spines of the books. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. On the third shelf behind a dusty medical dictionary, my fingers found an unfamiliar scratch on the wood paneling. I pushed with all my might, and with a grating squeal, the bookshelf slid aside, revealing a gray wall-mounted safe. It required a 6-digit code. I tried Michael's birthday. Nothing. Dr. Coleman's birthday. Nothing. My palms were slick with sweat. Time was running out. I closed my eyes, trying to recall what date would be most unforgettable to him. I remembered him muttering in his sleep a few nights ago. "Grace, don't blame me. My mother-in-law." Grace. Her death anniversary was July 15th. With trembling hands, I punched in 0715. For the last 2 digits, I tried the year she died, 2011. Still wrong. I wanted to cry in frustration. Suddenly, my eyes landed on an old calendar hanging on the wall. July 15th was circled. It was not only the day she died, but also the day he had received a prestigious medical award. I re-entered 0715 and changed the last 2 digits to the year he retired, 1 to 8. Beep. The lock clicked open. Inside, there was no money or jewelry. Just a worn, leather-bound journal and a stack of yellowed medical files. With shaking hands, I took them out. It felt like touching the tormented souls that had been locked away in the dark for years. I sank to the floor, the faded journal in my hands. The first page was written in neat cursive. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. Grace's diary, the final days. My heart clenched. This was the final testament of my mother-in-law, the tragic woman everyone pitied. I turned the pages. The early entries were filled with the happiness of a wife being cared for by her devoted physician husband. She wrote of her gratitude for the medicines he prepared and the restorative broths he cooked. But as I read on, the handwriting became shaky and distorted, the pages saturated with fear and despair. October 12th. The medicine Arthur gave me today was so bitter. After drinking it, my stomach felt like it was tied in knots. He said it was the medicine working, that I had to endure the pain to get better. But why am I getting weaker? Why is my hair falling out in clumps? And why are my nails turning purple? October 28th. I overheard Arthur on the phone. He said the first test subject was progressing well, that her internal organs were weakening according to plan. He said if he succeeded, it would be a breakthrough in superior genetic research. Test subject. Was he talking about me? He isn't curing me. He's documenting my slow, agonizing death to perfect some kind of formula. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. Tears dripped onto the yellowed paper. My tragedy today was a horrifying echo of what had happened to her 15 years ago. He wasn't a husband or a father. He was a demon in human form, using his own family as lab rats for his twisted ideals. The last page of the diary was filled with large, frantic script, as if written in the throes of death. Arthur says my genes are flawed, that my body is too weak to carry on his lineage. He says he needs a healthier vessel to create a superior race. My son, Michael. Arthur, please spare my son. He'll be the next victim. The writing ended in a long, drawn-out ink smear, as if she had taken her last breath mid-sentence. I closed the diary, my blood running cold. My mother-in-law hadn't died of a rare disease. She had died of multi-organ failure caused by the poison her husband slowly administered. And he had chosen me as his new daughter-in-law, cared for me so meticulously, not out of love, but because I had a stronger constitution than his first wife, a more suitable incubator for his monstrous experiment. Next to the diary was a thick file labeled Project Progeny Phase 2. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside were complex chemical formulas, biometric tracking charts, and most horrifyingly candid photos of me sleeping and eating alongside my own blood test results covered in his red-inked notes. Drug absorption rate excellent. Increased dosage for ovulation, stimulation, and neural suppression. Plan for artificial insemination next month. I threw the file on the floor as if it were burning hot. He was trying to turn me into a breeding machine. After I produced his perfect grandchild, he would discard me just as he had discarded his wife. The truth was so stark, so brutal, I wanted to scream and burn this house to the ground. But reason told me to stay calm. I had the evidence, but I was still trapped in the monster's lair. Steeling myself, I picked up the second file. The cover read Michael Coleman B. 1993, Pediatric Medical Records. These were my husband's records from when he was 3 years old. I remembered hearing that Michael had been a sickly child, prone to high fevers and seizures, kept alive only by a daily brain nutrient his father gave him. He had always been grateful to his father for pulling him back from the brink of death. But the cold, typewritten words in the file told a different story. Patient Michael Coleman, age 3. Symptoms: high fever, convulsions, persistent vomiting. Initial diagnosis: acute heavy metal and mercury poisoning. I rubbed my eyes and read the words again. Heavy metal poisoning. How could a 3-year-old child be poisoned like that? I turned to the treatment page and was met with a truth so shocking it stole my breath. Treatment method: administer small continuous doses of arsenic to induce natural antibody formation. Observe adaptive response of nervous system. Noteworthy side effects: potential for frontal lobe damage, inducement of chronic headaches, and compromised reproductive function. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream from escaping. Dr. Coleman had poisoned his own son as part of an immunity experiment. He had turned his toddler into a living test subject. It was a miracle Michael had survived, but the cost had been immense. His chronic headaches, his complete dependence on the brain nutrient his father gave him, and the fact that we were childless after 5 years of marriage, it wasn't bad luck or genetics. It was the result of a crime committed under the guise of paternal love. Michael knew nothing. He still worshipped his father like a living saint, willingly taking that sugar-coated poison every day. He was a victim, and at the same time a tragic puppet dancing on his father's strings. My heart ached for him. I had resented his weakness, hated him for slapping me at the hospital. But looking at these yellowed papers, I felt nothing but profound pity. He wasn't an accomplice. He was a flawed, broken product created by his own father. Dr. Coleman didn't love his son. To him, Michael was just a partially failed experiment, but one that was still useful for the next phase. His cruelty was beyond human comprehension. A clock chimed. My time was almost up. I knew I couldn't save Michael right now. If I told him the truth, he would never believe me. He'd just think I was crazier than ever. I had to save myself first. Only then could I pull him out of this abyss. With shaking hands, I raised the old flip phone. The camera quality was terrible, but it was good enough to capture the most critical pages of the diary and the medical records. I carefully photographed each page, the sound of the digital shutter, a nail in, Dr. Coleman's coffin. After I finished, I reconnected to the Wi-Fi and sent all the photos to Jessica. The progress bar spun endlessly, each rotation a torment. Upload complete. I breathed a sigh of relief. I sent Jessica a quick message. Save these to a USB, make multiple copies. I can't get out yet. I need more direct proof. Contact the private investigator you mentioned. I'll find a way to meet him. Jessica replied instantly. Emily, it's too dangerous. You have the evidence. Just call the police and have them rescue you. I looked at the files in my hands and smiled bitterly. Call the police. Against a man as respected and connected as Dr. Coleman, he'll just claim these are research notes or a work of fiction. He'll hire the best lawyers, and I'll be locked away in a mental institution for breaking and entering. I need something more powerful. I need a confession. I need to hear it from the devil's own mouth. I messaged Jessica again. It's not enough. I have to lure him into a trap, make him take off his own mask. Just get everything ready like I asked. I'll send a signal. I deleted the messages, powered off the phone, and hid it back inside the teddy bear. I carefully put everything back in the safe in the exact order I had found it. I closed the heavy door, wiped my fingerprints from the keypad, and pushed the bookshelf back into place, even using my sleeve to smudge the dust on the floor where I had walked. Just as I stepped out of the study and closed the door, I heard the familiar sound of a car in the driveway. He was back. My heart leaped into my throat. I raced back to my bedroom, locked the door, and dove into bed, pulling the covers over my head and feigning a deep sleep. Dr. Coleman's heavy footsteps came up the stairs. They stopped outside my door. He tried the handle, but it was locked. He stood there in silence for a long time, so long I thought I would suffocate under the blankets. Then his footsteps moved towards the study. I held my breath, listening. A minute passed. 2. There were no sounds of alarm. He hadn't noticed. I lay there, drenched in sweat. But my eyes no longer held the weak fear of before. They burned with a new resolve. I was no longer the obedient daughter-in-law. From this moment on, I was a warrior. I would play the part of the mad woman, the patient, the repentant wife, whatever role he wanted me to play to lure him into my trap. Knock, knock, knock. 3 measured taps on the door in Dr. Coleman's chillingly calm signature style. I took a deep breath, mussed my hair, and checked my expression in the mirror one last time. From this moment on, I was not the weak, weeping Emily. I was an actress, and my stage was this prison of a room filled with cameras. I went and opened the door, bowing my head low. Father, I said in a small voice, please come in. Dr. Coleman entered, carrying a tray with a pill and a glass of water. His eyes, sharp as an X-ray, scanned me from head to toe. When he saw my submissive, timid demeanor instead of the usual fearful resistance, a satisfied smile spread across his face. So you've finally come to your senses, he said, gently placing the tray on the table. Everything I do is for you and for this family. Your stubbornness only hurts yourself. I sat on the edge of the bed, wringing my hands, forcing out crocodile tears. I'm so sorry, Father. I've had a lot of time to think these last few days. I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted your good intentions. Please forgive me. Please don't lock me up anymore. It's so scary. Dr. Coleman nodded, handing me the blue pill, the one he called a brain stabilizer, but was actually a neural suppressant. It's good that you understand. I don't hold grudges against children. Take this and calm your nerves. After a good rest, you can come down and have dinner with Michael and me. I'll allow you to leave your room today. I took the pill, my hand feigning a tremor. Under his watchful gaze, I popped it into my mouth, took the glass of water, and gulped it down, making sure he could see my throat move as I swallowed. I even opened my mouth and stuck out my tongue. It's gone. Good girl, he said, patting my head. His touch was as repulsive as a snake slithering over my skin. Get some rest. I'll leave the door unlocked. The moment the door closed, I ran to the bathroom and locked it. I turned the faucet on full blast to cover any sounds. Leaning over the toilet, I shoved my fingers deep down my throat. A violent wave of nausea hit me. Along with acidic bile, the half-dissolved blue pill came up. My throat burned, and tears and snot streamed down my face. I flushed the toilet, watching the poison disappear, and with it my last shreds of innocence. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at my pale reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, but they shone with a steely determination. I knew he was watching me through the bedroom cameras, but the bathroom was his one blind spot, my last fortress of sanity. I went out, lay on the bed, and pretended the drug was taking effect, my eyes fluttering before closing completely. That evening, the atmosphere in the mansion was unnervingly cheerful. When Michael came home from work and saw me in the kitchen helping his father prepare dinner, he was stunned. He rushed over and put his arms around my shoulders, his eyes shining with joy. "Emily, is it really you? Are you all better? It's so good to see you downstairs. This house has been so empty without you." I forced a smile, gently removing his hands. "I'm feeling much better, honey. I'm making your dad's favorite beef stew to apologize. I've caused both of you so much worry." Michael nodded enthusiastically and called out to his father, who was reading the newspaper in the living room. "Dad, look, I told you my wife was a good person. Please don't be angry with her anymore." Dr. Coleman lowered his paper and smiled benevolently. "When was I ever angry? Every couple has their quarrels. What's important is that she has seen the error of her ways." Dinner was a lavish spread I had prepared myself. I served Dr. Coleman a piece of short rib, saying respectfully, "Here you go, Father. I heard Mom used to make it this way. I hope it's close to how she made it." At the mention of Grace, his hand holding his fork paused for a fraction of a second. It didn't escape my notice. He took a sip of his wine and looked off into the distance. "Your mother-in-law was a wonderful cook. It's a shame she wasn't as fortunate as you are now." I refilled his glass, deliberately steering the conversation. "Michael told me she suffered from a rare disease and you did everything you could but couldn't save her. It must have been so difficult for you back then, working, caring for her, and looking after a sickly Michael. Perhaps it was the wine, or perhaps my sudden obedience had lowered his guard." A smug, arrogant smile touched Dr. Coleman's lips. "Difficult? No. It was a necessary sacrifice. If your mother-in-law had been as compliant, intelligent, and constitutionally strong as you, she wouldn't have had to suffer so much at the end. Her body was too weak. It couldn't handle my formula." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was revealing the truth. I secretly reached into my apron pocket. Inside was my phone, already in voice recording mode. "The formula your mother-in-law couldn't handle." I prodded, my voice trembling. "What exactly was it, Father? Was it perhaps—" "Were." At that exact moment, the deafening roar of a blender erupted from the kitchen counter beside us. Michael was cheerfully making a fruit smoothie for dessert. The loud motor drowned out everything else. Dr. Coleman snapped back from his reverie as if waking from a trance. He turned to me, his sharp eyes once again filled with suspicion. "It was just a herbal concoction. Why bring up the past? Just eat your food before it gets cold." I stopped the recording. Disappointment washed over me. The file was filled with the noise of the blender, his crucial words lost in the chaos. I looked at Michael happily pouring his smoothie and didn't know whether to be angry or feel sorry for his innocent interference. The opportunity had vanished, but this incident confirmed one thing: Dr. Coleman was immensely proud of his work. That was his Achilles heel, and that was what I had to exploit. The next morning, Dr. Coleman announced he was taking me to see a friend of his, a Dr. Thomas, for a follow-up at his private clinic. He said he needed to see if the new medicine was working. I knew his real intention was to inject me with ovulation stimulants or other harmful drugs away from the prying eyes of the public hospital. But this was also my chance to get outside. The night before, I had secretly messaged Jessica to arrange a meeting with the contact she had mentioned. Dr. Coleman had a seniors club meeting, so Michael was driving. In the car, I feigned a terrible stomachache. Just as the car pulled up in front of the clinic, I clutched my stomach, my face contorted in pain. "Michael, I think it was the stew last night. My stomach is killing me. Can you go in and register first? I need to use the public restroom at that park across the street. The one in the clinic will have a line." Michael looked at me with concern but nodded. "Okay, but be quick. Dad said the appointment is at 9 sharp. I dashed across the street and circled behind the old public restroom building. A man in a black jacket, his face half hidden by a baseball cap, was waiting in a secluded corner. It was the private investigator Jessica had told me about. The meeting was as swift as a scene from a spy movie. No pleasantries. He pressed a small cloth pouch into my hand. "In here is a voice recorder disguised as a lipstick. It has a 12-hour battery life. This is a micro camera disguised as a button. Attach it to your clothes and it will stream a live feed to my server," he said in a quick, gravelly voice. "And this is the most important part. It's a temporary antidote. If you are forced to ingest any poison, take this immediately. It will partially neutralize the toxins and buy you a few hours." I clutched the pouch like a lifeline. "The cost?" I asked hurriedly. "Contact Jessica. I'll find a way to pay you back. Jessica's already taken care of it. She said to just make sure you stay alive. Now go before you're seen." I nodded. My thanks quickly hid the devices deep inside my undergarments and hurried back to the clinic. As I reached the entrance, I saw Michael pacing anxiously. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw me. There you are. It's your turn. Get in there. Doctor. Kim is waiting. I walked into the examination room, the smell of ethanol thick in the air. My heart was still pounding. A bald man with the same sinister smile as my father-in-law, Doctor. Kim was waiting with a syringe in his hand. I knew I was about to endure more pain, but this time I wasn't afraid. I had weapons in my arsenal now. I would record their every injection, their every word. The real war was just beginning. That evening, after returning from the clinic, Michael began to complain of a severe headache. He collapsed onto the sofa, clutching his head and groaning sweat pouring down his face. The pain arrived with the precision of an alarm clock. It was the signal that the effects of his usual medication were wearing off his body, craving a new dose of poison to quell the withdrawal symptoms. "Emily, get my pills," he managed to say, his face pale. "The ones Dad keeps in the cabinet." I rushed to the medicine cabinet and grabbed the bottle of unlabeled yellow pills that Dr. Coleman called his new brain nutrient. Holding the bottle, I felt a surge of conflict. If I gave him this pill, his pain would cease immediately, but the toxins would accumulate further. If I didn't, he would writhe in agony. I decided to take a gamble. I quickly emptied the poison pills onto a tissue, wrapped them up, and hid them. Then I crushed a 500 milligrams Tylenol tablet and filled an empty gelatin capsule I had secretly bought from a pharmacy that morning. I brought the fake pill and a glass of water to Michael. He swallowed it without a second thought. 15 minutes later, the pain hadn't vanished completely, but the analgesic effect of the Tylenol had eased it considerably. Exhausted, Michael fell asleep on the sofa. The next morning, Michael woke up looking dazed. He stretched, looked out the window, and then turned to me as I was brushing my hair. "That's strange, honey. Usually, after I take Dad's medicine, my head feels so foggy and heavy in the morning. It takes until noon for me to feel clear. But today, my head feels so light, so refreshed." I stopped brushing and turned to him, gently planting the first seed of doubt. "Isn't it strange? You've been taking your father's medicine for 30 years. Shouldn't you be completely cured by now? Why is it that when you stop taking it, you're in pain, and when you do take it, you feel foggy? Have you ever considered that maybe the medicine isn't curing you, but just making you dependent on it?" Michael frowned. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, but he quickly waved it away. "What are you talking about? Dad's the best doctor in the city. His medicine is a patented formula you can't get anywhere else. I probably just feel good because the weather's nice today." "I'm just worried about you," I said, stepping closer gently, dabbing the sweat from his forehead. I lowered my voice meaningfully. "Remember how much pain you were in yesterday? What kind of loving father would watch his son suffer for decades without finding a real cure, unless your suffering is somehow beneficial to someone?" Michael stared at me, his eyes wavering. He didn't scold me as he usually did. He just fell silent, turning his gaze to a blank space on the wall. I knew my words were starting to sink in, like a tiny crack in the formidable wall of his blind filial piety. If I kept chipping away, it might just crumble and reveal the naked truth hidden behind it. After our conversation that morning, a seed of doubt had been planted in Michael's mind. But I knew it wasn't nearly enough to topple the fortress of devotion he had built over 30 years. That seed needed to be watered with irrefutable scientific proof. While Michael was in the shower, I slipped into his home office and placed a single sheet of paper on his desk, a fake, comprehensive health report. I had asked Jessica to print a template from the internet, and I had doctored the numbers to perfectly match Michael's symptoms. Alongside it, I placed a few credible scientific articles about chronic heavy metal poisoning and sedative dependency syndrome. I didn't make it too obvious, but I didn't hide it either, placing it just under a stack of project files he was working on. Michael came out of the shower and sat down at his desk as usual. I pretended to read a book on the bed, but I watched his every move in the reflection of the vanity mirror. As he flipped through his documents, his hand paused. He picked up the medical report and began to read. At first he frowned in confusion, but the more he read, the deeper his brow furrowed and the color drained from his face. He unconsciously raised a hand to his temple, the very spot where his chronic headaches tormented him. His gaze shifted to the unlabeled bottle of yellow pills on the corner of his desk, the miracle drug his father had given him. He picked it up and shook it lightly, the dry rattle of the pills echoing in the quiet room. He opened it, tipped a single pill into his palm, and stared at it as if seeing it for the first time. The internal conflict was written all over his face on one side, absolute faith in his great father. On the other, cold scientific data that matched his physical condition with terrifying accuracy. Finally, Michael did something that made my heart leap with hope. He took a small plastic baggie from a drawer, placed the pill inside, and tucked it deep into the pocket of his suit jacket. He looked over at me, his eyes a complex swirl of confusion and fear. I quickly averted my gaze back to my book, pretending I had seen nothing. The next morning, the air in the house was heavy with an unspoken tension. Michael left for work earlier than usual without a word of goodbye to his father. Doctor. Coleman sat at the dining table, holding a newspaper, but his eyes were fixed suspiciously on his son's retreating back. He was an old fox. He could smell danger in the slightest change in his prey's behavior. Michael's acting strange today, Dr. Coleman muttered, lowering his paper and looking at me as I cleared the table. Did you say something to him? I feigned surprise and shook my head. What would I say? He's probably just stressed about his new project. He was tossing and turning all night. Dr. Coleman narrowed his eyes but said no more. I knew he was suspicious. His silence was the calm before the storm. I was certain Michael had taken the pill to be tested. Once the results were in, everything would be exposed. But I was terrified that Dr. Coleman would act before the truth came to light. The psychological warfare was draining us all. That afternoon, Michael came home early. His face was ashen, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't go to our room. He went straight to his father's study. I hid on the staircase, my heart pounding. The test results must have come in. Would he confront his father? The study door was slightly ajar. I heard Michael's trembling voice. Dad, I need to ask you something. What exactly is in the medicine you've been giving me? A few seconds of silence, then a deep sigh from Dr. Coleman. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. I heard Dr. Coleman cry out in pain. Ah, my heart, my chest. Dad, what's wrong? Michael cried out in panic. I rushed downstairs. Dr. Coleman was slumped in his chair, clutching his chest, his face twisted in agony. Michael was frantically searching for his father's heart medication. Dr. Coleman waved a weak hand. No, don't worry about me. I'm an old man. It's my time to go. It just breaks my heart to think that after raising a son with all my love, curing him with all my strength, he would now suspect his own father of trying to harm him. Tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks. His acting was so convincing that if I didn't know the truth, I would have believed him to be a heartbroken father. Michael, weak and blinded by his love for his father, immediately crumbled. He fell to his knees beside his father's chair, grabbing his hand and sobbing. I'm sorry, Dad, I was wrong. I shouldn't have listened to other people. I'm a terrible son. Other people. Dr. Coleman's eyes darted towards me, frozen in the doorway before he contorted his face in pain again. Your wife is sick, her mind is twisted. I don't blame her. It just hurts that you, my own flesh and blood, would doubt me. Michael turned and glared at me. There was no longer any affection in his eyes, only resentment and raw fury. He shouted, What did you do to my father? You filled my head with that nonsense, made me doubt my own dad, and now he's having a heart attack. Are you happy now? I stumbled backward, my back hitting the cold wall. I wanted to explain to Scream that it was all an act, but looking into Michael's fanatical eyes, I knew it was useless. He was too deeply manipulated, suffering from a severe case of Stockholm Syndrome towards his abuser. Even if the test results were real, they couldn't compete with Dr. Coleman's masterful emotional blackmail. I realized with a bitter certainty that I could not rely on Michael to save me. He was not an ally. He was just a pitiful, controlled puppet. If I wanted to live, I had to save myself. I left them downstairs performing their theater of father-son devotion and quietly returned to my room. After that incident, Dr. Coleman's hostility towards me became overt. He dropped the pretense of kindness, his gaze now like that of a prison warden watching a death row inmate. Michael became completely cold. He moved into the study to sleep, leaving me isolated in my sealed room. 2 days later, on an afternoon when rain was lashing against the windows, Dr. Coleman summoned me to the kitchen. A pot of bird's nest soup was simmering on the stove. The sweet fragrance filled the house, but to me it smelled of death. Dr. Coleman stirred the soup, then turned to me, a sinister smile no longer hidden. My dear, your condition isn't improving. After careful research, I've concluded that your body requires a stronger, more decisive treatment. This will be the last medicine I prepare for you. After you drink this bowl, all your pain and worries will disappear. You will be completely liberated. My blood ran cold. Liberated. I knew that beautiful word meant death. He had lost his patience. Michael's brief flicker of doubt, though extinguished, remained a potential threat. He had decided to eliminate me as quickly as possible to destroy the evidence. "We'll have a small family celebration tonight," he continued, his voice soft, but each word was a nail in my coffin. "I want you to drink this soup in front of Michael. Show him how obedient my daughter-in-law has become so our family can be harmonious again. Do you understand?" I nodded, lowering my head to hide the burning hatred in my eyes. "Yes, Father. I understand. I will drink it." "Good. Go get ready." I returned to my room, my hands and feet like ice, but my mind clearer than ever. The moment of life and death had arrived. There was no turning back. I took the prettiest dress from my closet and applied light makeup to cover my gaunt face. I double-checked the devices attached to my body. The recorder was on. The button camera was working. The antidote was in my pocket. I took out the old flip phone and sent a short but life-or-death message to Jessica and the investigator. "Tonight's the night. Save me." After sending the message, I removed the SIM card, snapped the phone in half, and threw it in the trash. I wouldn't need it anymore. At 7 p.m., sharp Michael arrived home. The house was decorated with candles and fresh flowers. Dr. Coleman sat at the head of the table, a look of triumphant satisfaction on his face. I descended the stairs. The soft silk dress made me look more fragile and delicate than ever. Michael looked at me surprised, but maintained his cold, distant demeanor. "Sit," Dr. Coleman gestured to the chair opposite him. "Your wife prepared this dinner tonight. She wants to apologize to us. She's finally learned her lesson." I pulled out the chair and sat down, smiling gently. "I'm sorry, Michael. And Father, I'm so sorry for all the trouble I've caused. I was foolish. I'd like to offer you both a toast as an apology." I stood, picked up a bottle of wine, and poured it into 3 crystal glasses. The camera on my chest recorded Dr. Coleman's every move. He watched me, his initial wariness gradually dissolving in the face of my absolute submission. In front of each of us was a bowl of soup. His was ginseng soup. Mine was the deadly bird's nest soup he had prepared. Steam rose from the bowls, carrying that sickly sweet scent that turned my stomach. I knew that a single spoonful could stop my heart within hours. I raised my wine glass, my voice choked with emotion. "To you, Father. Thank you for forgiving your foolish daughter-in-law." Dr. Coleman laughed heartily and downed his glass. Michael reluctantly followed suit. I merely touched the glass to my lips. "Oh, I said I forgot your favorite French wine. It's in the cabinet. I'll go get it." I turned towards the wine cabinet behind Dr. Coleman. As he was lecturing Michael on the virtues of filial piety, I pretended to trip on the edge of the rug, stumbling towards the table. "Ah!" I cried out, my arms flailing. I knocked over a large vase of flowers in the center of the table. Flowers and water splashed everywhere. Both Michael and Dr. Coleman instinctively looked towards the crashing vase. "Be careful," Dr. Coleman snapped. In that split second, as both their gazes were fixed on the floor, my left hand moved like lightning, switching the positions of the 2 soup bowls in front of me. The bird's nest soup slid over to Dr. Coleman's place and his ginseng soup slid into mine. The entire motion was masked by my bent-over posture and took less than a second. By the time Michael helped me up, everything was back in place. The 2 identical-looking bowls of soup were steaming innocently in their original spots. "I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy," I said, my face pale with what he assumed was fright. "Never mind, just sit down," Dr. Coleman said, his mood soured, but he suspected nothing. He could never have imagined that the obedient lab rat in his cage would dare to execute such a life-or-death counterattack right under his nose. "Please eat, Father," I urged, my voice sweet, my heart pounding like a war drum. "You went to so much trouble. It will get cold." Dr. Coleman looked at the bowl of what he thought was his soup but was actually the poison, and hesitated for a moment. But then his expression relaxed. He was too confident in his perfect plan. More importantly, he believed his completely subjugated prey would never dare to deceive him. "Yes, I suppose I should," he said. "Can't let your efforts go to waste." He picked up his spoon and took a large bite. I held my breath. 1 second. 2. 3. He put the soup in his mouth and swallowed. The Adam's apple in his throat bobbed. The old fox had finally stepped into the trap. "Is it good, Father?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice from shaking. "It's all right," he said, smacking his lips before taking another spoonful. "The finest quality bird's nest, a very clean taste." I watched him swallow a second spoonful, then a third. The hatred inside me burned fiercely. I put down my spoon and looked him straight in the eye, my voice changing completely from polite and demure to cold and hard. "Does it taste sweet?" To me, it smells like death. Dr. Coleman froze his spoon, clattering against the bowl. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with suspicion. What are you talking about? I said, letting a smile I had suppressed for days spread across my face. That soup was originally for me, wasn't it? To liberate me, just like you liberated Mom. But you've worked so hard, I thought I'd let you go first. What Dr. Coleman shot to his feet, his face changing color. He stared at the bowl of soup, then back at me. Abject terror filled his old eyes. Michael, sitting beside him, was completely baffled. Emily, what nonsense are you spouting? Why are you talking to Dad like that? I ignored Michael, continuing my psychological assault on Dr. Coleman. What's wrong, Father? Don't you trust your own medicine? You once said humans are just biological machines, and you are the engineer who fixes them. That the sacrifice of your daughter-in-law was for the glorious cause of creating a perfect race. Now that you've taken the medicine yourself, you should feel honored. Those words were the final blow. He understood everything. He knew that I knew. And worse, he knew he had just ingested the fatal dose he had prepared for me. His face turned from red to white, then to a ghastly shade of purple. He clutched his throat, coughing violently. The poison he created was fast-acting. You switched the soups, he rasped. He swiped his arm across the table, sending his bowl crashing to the floor. As the soup splattered on the leg of the wooden dining table, a horrifying sight unfolded before Michael's eyes. The spot where the liquid touched began to fizz and smoke, a corrosive hiss filling the air like acid eating through wood. Michael leaped to his feet, stumbling backward. He stared blankly at the blackened, charred mark on the floor. His faith, his respect, his love, it all crumbled in an instant. He turned to his father, his voice trembling. Dad, what was in that soup? Dr. Coleman had no energy left for acting. He staggered towards the medicine cabinet, frantically searching for an antidote, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Bottles crashed to the floor. The antidote. Where is the antidote? He mumbled, drool leaking from his mouth. I stood up and watched his desperate struggle calmly, the camera on my chest recording everything. I spoke loudly for Michael to hear. There is no antidote, Father. You wrote it in your journal, remember. This formula slowly destroys the internal organs, causing the pain of 1,000 needles, just like when Mom died. Do you remember? Shut up, Dr. Coleman spun around, his eyes bloodshot and crazed. I'll kill you, I'll kill you. He grabbed a fruit knife from the table and like a cornered animal lunged at me with terrifying speed. Emily, look out, Michael screamed. In that life-or-death moment, whether it was a husband's instinct or a human being's conscience, something inside him awakened. He threw himself in front of me. Thump. The sharp blade didn't find my body. It plunged deep into Michael's left shoulder. Blood gushed out, staining his white shirt crimson. He let out a pained groan and collapsed. Dr. Coleman froze. He stared at the knife buried in his son's shoulder, his blood-soaked hand trembling. Michael. My son. He stammered, his ferocity replaced by utter confusion. Even if he saw his son as a test subject, he had probably never imagined he would be the one to stab him. Michael clutched his shoulder and looked up at his father, his eyes filled with an agony that went far beyond the physical wound. Tears mixed with sweat streamed down his face. Dad, why? Why did you do this? To Emily. To me. Dr. Coleman stumbled backward into the wine cabinet, sending bottles crashing to the floor. He looked at Michael, then at me, and suddenly began to laugh, a wild, despairing cackle. Why? Because you're all weak and stupid. I gave you life. I gave you intelligence. I gave you everything. You were my masterpiece, Michael. And you betrayed me for this woman. A masterpiece, Michael laughed bitterly, blood still seeping through his fingers. You turned me into a drug addict, made me infertile, and made me an accomplice in the murder of my own wife. This is your masterpiece. Shut up, you know nothing of science, Dr. Coleman roared, waving his hands madly. I did it to create a superior race. Your mother's sacrifice, your wife's sacrifice. They were necessary. History will remember me. I looked at him with disgust. The man was beyond redemption. All humanity was gone, replaced by the mania of a pathological scientist. In the distance, the wail of police sirens grew louder, tearing through the quiet suburban night. I knew Jessica and the investigator had acted on the signal from my camera. The sound of the sirens seemed to snap Dr. Coleman out of his delusion. He knew there was no escape. His eyes darted around and finally landed on me. It's all your fault, he snarled. You ruined everything. He wrenched the knife from Michael's shoulder. A spray of blood hit his face, making his old features look demonic. He didn't try to run. He charged at me again, intent on dragging me to hell with him. I scrambled backward, tripped over a chair leg, and fell. He was on top of me in an instant, raising the knife high. I closed my eyes instinctively, raising my arms to shield myself. Bang! A gunshot ripped through the air as the front door was kicked open. A SWAT team stormed in. Dr. Coleman stopped the knife clattering to the floor. He clutched his right arm, blood pouring from a wound, and staggered before collapsing beside the dining table among the shattered porcelain and the black corrosive stains of his deadly soup. I opened my eyes. A young police officer was aiming his gun at Dr. Coleman's smoke, still curling from the barrel. Jessica and the investigator rushed in and helped me to my feet. "Emily, are you okay?" Jessica sobbed, pulling me into a hug. I shook my head, my body trembling, but I didn't cry. I looked over at Michael. He was lying motionless in a pool of his own blood, his face pale, his eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling where a grand crystal chandelier glittered as if mocking his family's tragedy. Dr. Coleman was immediately handcuffed. Even as he was pinned to the floor, he kept muttering about his great scientific achievements and the ignorant fools who stood in the way of evolution. His screams echoed through the empty house, the desperate, horrifying cries of a dying beast. The magnificent mansion, once the model home of the neighborhood, was now awash in the flashing red and blue lights of police cars and ambulances. The sirens tore through the night, but to me it was the sound of liberation. I sat on the cold stone steps in front of the house. A thin blanket a female officer had draped over my shoulders did little to stop the bone-deep tremors. Before me was a chaotic scene of uniformed officers moving about, the crackle of their radios filling the air. I learned later that Jessica and the investigators' team had been waiting outside, alerted by the live feed from my button camera. They had stormed in at the last possible second, saving me from the madman's blade. Dr. Coleman was led away in handcuffs. As they pushed his head down into the police car, he continued to rant about his scientific mission and the ignorance of humanity. When he passed me, his eyes were no longer those of a respected physician. They were bloodshot, filled with the hatred and madness of a wounded animal. A gurney was wheeled out. Michael lay on it motionless, his face as white as a sheet. The wound on his shoulder was bandaged, but blood was still seeping through. He was conscious, his hazy eyes searching the crowd for me. When our gazes met, I saw a single tear roll down his gaunt cheek. It was a tear of belated regret, and of the excruciating physical and mental pain of realizing the man he had worshipped his entire life was in fact a monster. Jessica knelt beside me, her eyes red with worry. She squeezed my hand. "It's over, Emily. You're safe now." I nodded, wanting to thank her but unable to find my voice. I held onto her shoulder and struggled to my feet. My legs felt like they had no strength. I took one last look at the grand house behind me. The opulent chandeliers were still shining, brightly illuminating expensive art and luxurious furniture. All that splendor was just a facade for a hell on earth, a place where the most horrific crimes were committed in the name of family. I was helped into a police car to give my statement as Michael was rushed to the emergency room. As the car pulled away and the heavy iron gates closed behind us, I rested my head against the window, watching the streetlights blur past. It felt like waking up from a long, terrifying nightmare. A light rain began to fall, pattering against the glass as if trying to wash away all the filth and pain of the past. I knew that from this night on, my life would begin a new chapter. It would be painful, but at least it would be the truth, not a sweet, deadly lie. The following days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and police interviews. With the irrefutable evidence, I provided my mother-in-law's tear-stained diary, Michael's falsified medical records, and the video footage of Dr. Coleman preparing the poison, and his own crazed confession. The secrets of the esteemed physician were laid bare. The crime scene and forensic analysis horrified even veteran detectives. In the secret room behind the bookshelf, they found dozens of vials of toxic chemicals and notebooks detailing decades of experiments on his wife and son. He hadn't just poisoned them, he had meticulously calibrated the doses to ensure they wouldn't die immediately, but would suffer a slow, agonizing decline, all of which he observed and recorded. But the most heartbreaking evidence was Michael's blood test results. A sheet filled with red flagged numbers was placed in front of me. The levels of lead, mercury, and arsenic in his blood were hundreds of times the acceptable limit. Doctors concluded that his frequent headaches, nervous exhaustion, and infertility were all due to severe damage to his central nervous and reproductive systems from the toxins accumulated since childhood. The brain nutrient he took daily was found to contain small amounts of narcotics and neural suppressants, which kept him in a constant state of mild confusion, making him easy to manipulate and completely dependent on his father. I took those results to the hospital to see Michael. He had survived the physical wound, but his spirit was broken. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring blankly out the window. He looked 10 years older. When I placed the report in front of him, he picked it up with a trembling hand. He didn't scream or rage. He just bowed his head and silent tears dripped onto the back of his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I was a fool. I hurt you. I helped him try to kill you." I looked at my husband, and an overwhelming sense of pity washed over me. I had hated his weakness and blamed his indifference, but now I understood that he was just as much a victim. For 30 years, he had been a child, trapped in a poisoned glass box, robbed of his right to a healthy life, brainwashed into becoming a tool for his father's ambition. The case sent shockwaves through the community, the media dubbing him the devil doctor. The image of the model intellectual family was shattered. Dr. Coleman was charged with murder, attempted murder, and illegal possession of toxic substances. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 3 months later, Michael and I decided to sell the mansion. We couldn't live in that house of horrors any longer. After paying for legal fees and damages, there was still a significant amount of money left. Michael began detoxification treatment. It was a process more grueling than any surgery. Without the drugs, his body rebelled. He suffered from splitting headaches, violent vomiting, and seizures. Some nights he would cower in a corner of our temporary apartment, crying for his medicine or screaming in terror at hallucinations of his father standing in the doorway. I would hold him tight, whispering through my own tears, "You can do this. I'm here. No one can hurt you now." I didn't leave him. Many people advised me to divorce him and find a new life, but I couldn't. We had walked through hell together. Now that we had reached the light, I couldn't abandon him. Besides, I knew there was a fundamental goodness deep inside Michael. It had just been buried for too long. After 6 months of relentless struggle, Michael was finally clean. His health gradually improved. He didn't want to go back to his old corporate job or have anything to do with the world that had been designed by his father. He said he wanted to live his own life. With the remaining money, we bought a small condo in a quiet green suburb. And with what was left, Michael decided to pursue a childhood dream. His father had always ridiculed. He opened a small bookstore. It was tucked away on a quiet corner with simple wooden shelves and the warm scent of new paper. Michael would carefully wipe down and arrange each book. For the first time in decades, I saw him smile, a genuine smile, free from anxiety and fear. We started over from the simplest things, grocery shopping together, cooking meals, tending to the small plants on our balcony, reading books in the evening. There were no more poison tonics, no more hypocritical lectures. Just simple meals filled with human warmth. The scars on our hearts were still there, but we were learning to heal each other. A year passed. On a crisp autumn day, I walked into the bookstore holding an ultrasound photo. The doctor had called it a miracle. After the toxins had cleared from his system, Michael's reproductive functions had miraculously recovered. The fetus was 8 weeks old and healthy. Michael was on a wooden ladder, arranging books on a high shelf. The evening sun slanted through the window, casting a soft halo around him. He turned, saw me, and smiled. "Hey, you're back. What do you want for dinner, my treat?" Instead of answering, I walked over and placed the photo in his hand. He stared at it, his eyes widening, his hand starting to shake. He looked at me then, down at my stomach, and stammered, Is this real? Our baby?" I nodded, tears of joy streaming down my face. He leaped off the ladder, swept me into his arms, and spun me around. He buried his face in my neck, his shoulders shaking. I knew he was crying. "Thank you, Emily," he sobbed. "Thank you. I'm going to be a good father. Our child will be free to do whatever they want. I will never." He choked on his words, but I understood. He would never be like his father. This child would be raised with true love, not control and pathological calculation. That night, we sat on our balcony looking out at the city lights. Michael rested his ear against my stomach, whispering to the tiny life inside. I looked up at the starry sky, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. The nightmare was over. Dr. Coleman was paying for his sins behind bars, and we, the survivors, were writing the rest of our story. Life, I thought, was fair. You reap what you sow. You have to go through the storm to appreciate the sunshine. I didn't know what the future held, but I believed that as long as we had love and kindness, we could overcome anything. I squeezed Michael's hand and took a deep breath of the free air. "The sun will rise again tomorrow, honey. Thank you for listening to my story."